All right. Up next, we have the author for Hazardous to a Duke's Heart. Sabrina Jeffries is a New York Times bestselling author of more than 50 novels and works of short fiction, some written under the pseudonym Deborah Martin and Deborah Nicholas. Her writing has been published in more than 21 languages, and there are over 9 million copies of her books in print. A four-time Brita Award finalist, Jeffries has won the Holt Medallion Award, the Maggie, and the Bookseller's Best Award. After earning her PhD in English Lit from Tulane University, she chose writing over academics, and now her sexy and humorous historical romances routinely land on the New York Times and USA Today bestseller lists. Sabrina lives in North Carolina with her husband and adult son, who has inspired her to actively champion the cause of autistic children. Joining her today is her editor, Wendy McCurdy, and editorial director at Kensington Books. Wendy has been working with New York Times and nationally bestselling authors for decades, not only at Kensington, but at Berkeley for many years, and Bantam before that. During that time, she's been fortunate enough to have worked with some of the top names in historical romance, mystery, and historical fiction, certainly including Sabrina Jeffries. Wendy is a graduate of Amherst College. She has 2 grown sons, and she lives in New Jersey with her very lively beagle, Benny. Welcome, Sabrina and Wendy. You can join us.
Hello, I'm making an attempt to do this, but I'm actually having a really bad cough attack. So if you see me keeling over or choking, that's why. Okay. So after listening to those 3 very imaginative romances and very trendy, now we're coming to a more traditional historical romance. And you and I have both been in the romance business for a very long time, myself longer than you. So what would you say are the ways that the world of romance has changed?
That the world of romance has changed? Is that what she said?
That romances have changed over these years.
Well, they have changed in a variety of ways. First of all, there's more emphasis, I think, on consent, which I like. There's a more divergent number of romances. You can, as Kimberly said before me, if you want to read this, you can find, you can find a dinosaur romance. You can find a romance that uses BDSM. You can find every flavor in between, and I like that because for a long time it was very set in its ways. Romance was. I also think that women have more agency in the newer romances. And I like that because even though I write in the Regency period, I do a lot of research into women's lives, and you always find women who were feminists and who were pro-women and who bucked the status quo, and I like that. I like that it's acceptable. Not everyone is wanting to read that. There are people who want to read the history and they want it to be exactly what the history was. I happen to like to find the offbeat, unusual characters in historicals. That's what I enjoy. I caught you when you had to cough. I'm so sorry.
That's all right. I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to speak at all. So my take, well, okay, so wait a minute. So what is it about the Regency romance that is just a perennial favorite?
Well, part of it is the whole group of people that came before. Jane Austen, of course, who was writing contemporary romances in her day, but that milieu is very appealing. I think a lot of people like, and I was going to say, and Georgette hair, and even Barbara Cartland. I grew up reading Barbara Cartland because Georgia Dare wasn't available where I was. So, but I think there's that. But I think that there's also so much change going on in English society at that time. They were changing from a very staid period in English history, the Georgian period. And in the Regency, people started, kind of pushing against the rules a little bit, believe it or not. So what you have is the beginning of the middle class. You have the beginning of um, different costumes. Oh, that's. I have a friend who says the reason the Regency is loved is because the costumes are appealing, which I find interesting. But it's true that when you look at those huge dresses and the very mannered, the patches on the cheek and that kind of thing. And then you go to the Victorian age where you have the leg of mutton sleeves and the crinolines. You've got that lovely Regency period in the middle that has those classic lines, beautiful dresses. It's the beginning of the way men's attire is still to this day. The black tailcoats and that. If you go to formal, affairs, that's still kind of what people dress in. So it's a change that we can relate to, and I think that is one reason that it always interests me, because a lot of readers will say, I don't really like Victorian, I like Regency, and they're very firm on that. They don't. I think there are more of them that are willing to try Georgian, but in general, they prefer the Regency and they don't want to get too far into the Victorian era, and I kind of understand that.
So this book, I think, has a slightly bigger feel to it at the beginning before it goes into the wonderful romance and everything. Which I think may be a little bit bigger than what you've done in the past, but do you want to explain how it starts?
Sure. I found this little piece of history that a lot of people don't know much about. I just saw it in a footnote, believe it or not, of the diary of Jane Austen's cousin. And I went, what is this? People going to France during the Napoleonic Wars and staying there for 11 years. Did that really happen? Well, it turns out it really happened after the Peace of Amiens. I won't go into it, but what happened were a lot of Brits rushed to France during a year of peace. And then when the war was back on, Napoleon was mad about the war being on, and he imprisoned everybody who was British, who was still left in France. And so I thought, what would it be like? Because they stayed there. Some of them stayed there for 11 years. And I thought, what would it be like to go on vacation? They were all like, oh, we'll go see Paris and we'll, have a good time, and then discover that you have been put into a detainment camp for 11 years away from your family. The last half of that period, there was absolutely no communication allowed, so no letters. And so I really had fun thinking about, okay, what would happen? What would it do if you did that? What would it do to the family? What would it do to you to have that separation? So I kind of think of it as, what would happen if you went on vacation and didn't come home for 11 years, not by choice? And that's kind of the setup.
Yeah, it's almost a bit of a time travel feel. So John comes home at the beginning of the book, and what are the changes that he wasn't expecting that he encounters?
Well, first of all, of course, he went off on his grand tour, and he was a third son, and so, his dad was Duke. He had two older brothers, and they have all passed away, which, by the way, happened in some of these cases. And he comes back to discover that he's Duke, and he did not expect that. He was never raised to be Duke. He is sort of thrown. So that's one thing. His sister has grown up. When he left, she was very young. And now she's, 19. And so that's a real big change. His mother has grown gray. Of course, his father is dead. So he wasn't there for the deaths of his father or his brothers. England has changed. London has expanded. There was a lot of building done in that period. So I've tried to find where to put my hero in the space, and I said, oh, I want his family to have been in this square, and then I go to look it up, and it wasn't built at the time he left. So it's like, okay, I got to find one of these squares that was actually built when he left England. So it was interesting, the things that you discovered. I mean, Hyde Park, I don't think was there, or it had just it was there, but it wasn't the same character. And just all sorts of things have changed. And he's been away. I grew up abroad, so I was raised as what they call a third culture kid. And when I first came back to the States, it was a huge change for me. I think that's why this story appealed to me so much. It was like I grew up in a different culture, and suddenly I'm back in the States and everything is different. And I was too young to remember it when I went to Thailand. I was 7. So it's very much now I'm a fish out of water. And I think that's the case for John.
Trying to see if I can keep the cough down.
Sorry.
It's okay. So I was actually going to get to this a little bit later, but we're probably running out of time. So your fascinating background and the way that you grew up, do you want to explain that a little bit? And then how does that inform the writing that you've done?
So my parents went to Thailand as missionaries. And so I was raised there as a missionary's child. And I came back and went to college. And then I, kind of separated from my upbringing a little bit. But I spent a lot of time alone as a child because we were out in the boonies. We were nowhere close to anything. So I read. I was at the right age to really be starting to read historical fiction. I read Lorna Doone. I loved Lorna Doone. I read a lot of Regency romance, which was just beginning. I could get my hands on them anyway. And so it just, all of that just completely captivated me. And I had a lot of time to myself. So I wrote my own stories. I sat down and wrote, and they were all romances. And believe it or not, at the age of 12, I went, when I grow up, I'm going to be a romance writer. I really did decide that. And then I went, and got a PhD in English literature and everything. And then I went, I think I'm going to attack that plan I had as a 12-year-old. And so I never looked back. I like it.
Yeah, you went back to your original plan.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. How many people get to do that?
Yeah. So in most of your books, maybe all of them, you incorporate lots of interesting features. And in this one, it's the sculpting that the heroine likes to do, which takes the hero John by surprise. It's a child character who has, he was born with brain damage and has a limit to his maturity, which is very interesting because of the way that was treated at the time. So can you talk about how the characters in this book handle that versus how society would have handled that at the time?
Yes. In this case, it's the heroine's brother. That's a bit of a spoiler, sorry, but I have a son who is profoundly autistic. He's an adult and he lives with us. He's a sweetheart. But I've long wanted to have a disabled child and deal with how hard that would be for someone uh, in that period, because back then they either sent them away to the country. There were actually a couple of royal children that one of which we think was epileptic, and another one which had some disability. It was kind of vague about what the disability was, but my they were taken care of because their family had wealth and everything. They were sent to a cottage with caregivers who took care of them. And in one case, the queen would go visit uh, her child at the cottage, but it wasn't, I'm sure, very often. And so that whole way of, well, we have to keep them hidden, we put them out of, public eye. And it wasn't just royalty, it was anyone. It was very difficult to have a disabled child at that time. And if you had no money, those children probably ended up in something worse. Um, so it kind of depended. So I wanted to deal with this little boy, and his sister will do anything to protect him from ending up in a place like that. And so my heroine, that's part of her reason for trying. She wants to start an art school, which the hero thinks is madness. You should be getting married. She's the hero's tutor's daughter, and the man who originally went with him to France on his grand tour. That's how he ended up in France, and she is trying to find a way that she can support both her and her brother and keep her brother safe. And so that's really her motivation for most of the book. But I had fun writing the little brother because he's 11, but he has the mind of a 5 or 6 year old. And because she's protected him, he is full of joy. He is very sad that he can't go to school. That's hard for him. But she knows what he would face if he went to one of the grammar schools or whatever. So she teaches him at home. He has someone who teaches him at home, and that's what I decided to emphasize with their relationship. But I had fun with him because he looks at the world a lot like my son does. My son's a very, very happy grown man. But even now, I bring my son everywhere. We bring our son everywhere. We go to the grocery. He likes to go out and about. That's his favorite thing to do. Unlike some autistic men, he wants to be out. Let's go do something. And so I take him, but I've had comments before because he wears Mardi Gras beads everywhere he goes, and he perseverates on them. He rubs them all the time. And people who don't really understand, especially with autism, there's no physical markers to tell them that he's disabled. So they look at my son and he's sitting there rubbing his beads, and they just think he's odd. And I've had people make comments. I don't care. My feeling is, he's got as much right to be in the world as anyone. But I remember when he was young, an older lady told me, I think it's so good that you didn't send him someplace. And I thought, why would I send him someplace? He's my son, but that was the way it was looked at. So not that far distant a past either.
Yeah. So final question, and then we'll throw it back to Beth. What do you think is the spice level of this book? Because I think it's pretty hot. I mean, your books are always, but I think there's instant chemistry between the hero and heroine, and it carries through the book. What do you think?
Yeah, I was worried I was pushing it too much, but I feel a little bit like Kimberly. It's like it's been a while since anybody kissed. So because I like that part of a book. I enjoy, for me, the intimacy is just as important as all the other things that go on. I want them to be able to talk to each other, of course, and interact, but I also want to know that they really have that physical passion for each other. So I try to depict that. And I'm one of these people that I don't like to pull punches and give a flowery description of, I write a more visceral, I think, passionate love scene than the average historical romance author. There are plenty who do that too, but I'm one of those. Put me in that category.
Okay, well, you've done a great job on this book. I love it. And with that, let's throw it back to Beth. And I will go off screen to start packing again.
Take care. That's been such a great conversation, and I've been reading your books for years, Sabrina. So this is really great. Longtime historical romance fan. Have a great night. So that was our session this evening, and it's just been such a delight to meet all the authors and their editors. And I just want to say thank you to all the publishers, editors, and authors and BuzzBooks for inviting us here today.